I always believed family was meant to protect you, to guide you, support you, stand beside you, especially through loss. So when my father passed away, I never imagined the deepest betrayal of my life would come from the person I trusted most, my own mother. But that truth didn't reveal itself all at once. It started slowly, quietly, with a strange conversation, a missing document, and a lawyer who looked at me with concern. Looking back now, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. My name is Rachel. I'm 32 years old and I spent most of my life trying to make my parents proud. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I worked hard, paid my bills, and stayed close to my mom and dad after my siblings moved away. Dad and I were especially close. He was the kind of man who believed in fairness. He talked often about planning for the future, making sure everything was in writing, so no one would fight when he was gone. I used to laugh and tell him, Dad, nobody in our family would fight over money. Back then I thought love was stronger than greed. Back then I was naive. The day after the funeral, grief sat heavy in the house. My mother barely spoke and I assumed it was the shock. Losing Dad so suddenly broke something inside all of us. But that night when the guests left and the last condolences faded into silence, I overheard something. My mother was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low, urgent. No one else needs to know, it's better this way, she'll understand eventually. I froze in the hallway. Who was she? Understand what? I told myself it was just grief. I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to believe my mom was hiding anything. But something inside me whispered, pay attention. 2 weeks later, I received a call from my father's lawyer, Mr. Dawson. Rachel, I need you to come to my office, he said. There's something we need to discuss before the estate moves forward. His voice was gentle, almost cautious. When I arrived, he slid a file across his desk. But when I opened it, half the documents were missing from the estate plan Father had discussed with me years before. I don't understand, I whispered. Dad told me everything was equal between me and my siblings. What happened to the trust he created? Mr. Dawson hesitated, removing his glasses. That's what concerns me. Your mother came here 2 days ago requesting changes. She insisted the entire inheritance be transferred solely to her. My breath caught in my throat. I'm sorry, he said softly. She provided a new will draft with her attorney, cutting you out completely. It felt like the room shrank. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could barely form words. She wouldn't do that. But even as I defended her, memories surfaced, the whispered phone calls, the locked drawer, the sudden coldness in her voice when money was mentioned. The betrayal was unfolding slowly. But unmistakably, I drove home shaking. Questions swarmed my mind. Why would she do this? Did she need the money? Did she think I didn't deserve anything Dad wanted for me? How long had she been planning this? When I walked into the house, Mom was sitting at the dining table sorting through stacks of paper. She looked up, startled to see me early. Oh, you're home. Her tone was tight, guarded, not the grieving mother I expected. I forced a steady voice. Mom, why did you go to the lawyer without telling me? Her eyes flashed, just for a second, but I saw it. Fear, guilt, anger. She tried to speak calmly, too calmly. Your father wanted me to handle everything. It's simpler this way. That's not what he told me, I replied quietly. She stood abruptly, slamming a drawer shut. You're being dramatic, Rachel. I raised you. I know what's best for this family. The words cut deep, not the meaning itself, but the tone, the ownership, the entitlement. It didn't sound like grief anymore. It sounded like control. That night I lay awake replaying every interaction, every comment Dad ever made about fairness, honesty, family unity. And suddenly his careful planning made sense. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of what would happen after, afraid someone he trusted might try to take advantage. A cold chill ran through me. My own mother was trying to erase me from the inheritance, erase Dad's wishes, erase my future. The betrayal wasn't emotional anymore. It was financial, legal, strategic. And I knew in that moment I had to prepare for a fight I never imagined. Because this time family wasn't protection. Family was the danger, and court day was coming. The next morning I woke with a heaviness in my chest, a feeling that something irreversible had begun. For the first time in my life, I didn't trust my mother. I tiptoed downstairs and saw her sitting at the kitchen table again. Papers spread everywhere, pen in hand. She stopped writing when she heard me. Her expression shifted into something unfamiliar, calculating. Morning, I said cautiously. She nodded but didn't smile. I poured myself coffee, watching her hands. She quickly covered a document with another sheet. It was clear she didn't want me to see what she was doing. Mom had always been private but never secretive. This was different. This was guarded, defensive. I realized something in her had changed long before Dad passed away. I just hadn't noticed. Later that afternoon, I drove back to Mr. Dawson's office. I need to know everything, I demanded. Every detail, don't hold back. He exhaled heavily. 2 days after your father died, your mother came in with a lawyer you do know. She requested a full transfer of assets, house, business accounts, life insurance, all retirement funds. I swallowed hard. That's not even possible without probate, I whispered. No, he said, not unless the previous will is invalidated. His words hit like a punch. She's trying to override it, I breathed, stunned. She wants the court to believe Dad intended everything to be hers. Dawson nodded gravely. It looks like she planned this for some time. A cold realization washed over me. My mother had prepared for this, maybe even before Dad passed. That evening, I confronted her again, calmly this time. Mom, I began, keeping my voice steady, why weren't the original papers where Dad kept them? She didn't flinch, she expected the question. I moved them for safekeeping, she replied. Where? That's none of your concern. I stared at her, shocked by the blunt dismissal. That document affects all of us. Dad made those decisions with his mind clear. She looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and superiority. Honey, you're emotional, you're grieving. You don't understand the obligations I have. Bills, debts, responsibilities. Her words felt rehearsed, too polished. Something was missing from this explanation. My curiosity turned into suspicion. What debts? I asked slowly. Her eyes shifted away for a split second, just long enough to reveal panic. Adult things, she snapped. Things you wouldn't understand. I recognized that tactic, avoidance through condescension. Something deeper was happening. A few nights later, I received a call from an unknown number. Is this Rachel? Yes. This is attorney Linda Hughes. I represent your mother. My breath stalled. Why are you calling me? I'm informing you that your presence is not required in future filings regarding the estate. Your mother will be handling everything. What filings? I demanded. I suggest you speak to your mother. She hung up. My hands shook. Mom didn't want me anywhere near the legal process. She wanted control, total control. The next day, I drove to my childhood home to look for clues, not to snoop, but to understand. Dad always kept important papers locked in his office drawer. I remembered helping him file things as a teenager. He showed me the folder labeled clearly, Estate Documents Final Copy. The drawer was locked. Mom was asleep upstairs. I searched through his desk cabinet where he kept spare keys in a tin box. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I opened it. The key was still inside. Part of me wished it weren't, because the truth hurts when you uncover it. I unlocked the drawer. Inside were yellowed envelopes, business tax files, old letters, and at the very bottom an empty space. A space where the estate folder should have been. My breath caught. She took it. She really took it. I stood frozen, grief mixing with anger. The betrayal was complete. That night I sat across from her in the living room. Mom, I know you removed Dad's will from the drawer. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned back and crossed her arms. You don't know what I've had to sacrifice, she said coldly. Everything I built with your father, everything I deserve to keep. Her voice was sharp, fueled by something deeper than grief. Suddenly, I feared I didn't know the woman sitting in front of me at all. We should all honor Dad's wishes, I whispered. He trusted you, he trusted us. No, she snapped. He trusted me, I was his wife, you were just his child, you didn't earn anything. Her words sliced through me. Earn? Was love conditional now? I looked into her eyes and saw something unsettling. Not sadness, not confusion, ambition, cold ambition. At that moment, I made a silent promise I would protect Dad's legacy, even if it meant facing my own mother in court, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, justice, and a betrayal so deep it demanded consequences. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke with a pit in my stomach, knowing that my mother was already a few steps ahead, manipulating, plotting, and keeping secrets. I couldn't let her win, not this time. Dad's wishes weren't just words on paper, they were a reflection of his fairness, his integrity, and I couldn't let them be erased by ambition and greed. I started small, quietly. I revisited every conversation Dad had ever had with me about the inheritance. I remembered the evenings in his study, the gentle way he explained why certain assets went to specific people. And slowly I began reconstructing the picture he had left behind. Then came the more tangible work. I made a list, every document, every account, every asset that was legally his. I contacted old family friends who had been close to Dad, asking subtle questions about any discussions he'd had. Some offered memories that made me smile, others made me choke back tears. But all of it helped me build a case, a mental map of what should have been. I also needed legal support. Mr. Dawson had warned me, my mother's moves were strategic, almost surgical. She wasn't just acting out of grief, she was prepared. So I reached out to a second attorney, someone with a reputation for fighting tough estate cases. I explained everything, the hidden will, the sudden changes, the mysterious lawyer call. He listened, took notes, and finally said something I clung to. Rachel, if what you say is true, there's a path. But you need evidence. Every phone call, every document, every unusual action. Keep meticulous records, we'll fight smart. Smart, that word became my mantra. I couldn't confront her with emotion, I needed proof. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. I was reviewing old emails on Dad's computer, something I rarely did. Hidden in a folder labeled Private Notes was an email from Dad to my uncle, dated just 2 weeks before his passing. It clearly outlined his intentions, even hinting at concerns about someone possibly trying to manipulate the will. I read it over and over. Dad had known somehow. He had seen the possibility of betrayal, and he had left breadcrumbs for me. With renewed determination, I began documenting everything at home. I photographed every interaction, every document my mother touched, every suspicious call I received. It felt strange, like spying on someone I had loved my entire life, but I kept reminding myself this was about justice, not revenge, though part of me admitted the anger fueled me. At the same time, I had to guard my emotions. My mother seemed to sense my growing suspicion. Her warmth had vanished, replaced by a kind of distant calculation. Each time I asked about a document or a meeting, she deflected or smiled too widely, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. One evening, while pretending to be absorbed in paperwork in the living room, I overheard her whispering on the phone again. Yes, she suspects nothing. By the time she finds out, it will be too late. My stomach twisted. She called me she so casually, like I was an obstacle to remove. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of grief was still there, but now it was mixed with determination. I couldn't undo Dad's death, but I could undo her plan. I had to. I began to strategize like a chess player. Each piece had a role. The lawyers were my knights. Dad's emails were my rooks. The evidence I was collecting my pawns, slowly advancing to corner the queen. And my mother was playing the king, vulnerable in her overconfidence. I also realized that patience was essential. I couldn't rush her into a confrontation. Any wrong move, any hint that I suspected, and she would cover her tracks faster than I could react. Every smile she offered was a potential trap. Every casual word could hide manipulation. Weeks passed. The court date approached, though we didn't yet know the exact schedule. I spent nights cross-referencing documents, making timelines, and noting inconsistencies in my mother's story. I reread Dad's financial statements, comparing them to the newly drafted will. Every detail mattered, and slowly I began to notice patterns, subtle discrepancies that revealed her strategy. Certain accounts had been transferred at odd times. Certain assets that Dad had always said were untouchable had been quietly moved. She thought she was clever, but her fear of leaving traces betrayed her. One night, after a particularly long day, I sat down with a notebook and wrote, "This is not just about inheritance, it's about respect, it's about truth. Dad trusted her and she betrayed him. I will not let this stand." By the time I set that pen down, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and power. For the first time since Dad passed, I felt a flicker of control. The plan wasn't complete yet. There would be more obstacles. There would be more manipulation, more lies, more betrayals to uncover. But I had learned something critical. I could fight. I could win. And I would make sure that when the court finally heard our story, the truth would be undeniable. Because betrayal, I realized, can cut deep, but the strength to confront it can cut deeper. The morning of the hearing, I felt my heart thumping so loudly I thought the entire courthouse could hear it. I'd prepared for this moment for weeks, months, really, but standing outside those tall, imposing doors, doubt tried to creep in. Could I really prove what my mother had done? Could I stand face to face with her and show the world the betrayal I'd uncovered? I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this wasn't personal, it was justice. Dad's wishes were clear. That was my anchor. When I entered the courtroom, the air felt heavy with anticipation. The judge, a stern woman with an air of sharp attention, gave me a brief nod. On the other side, my mother sat with her attorney, her posture calm, almost smug, as if she already knew she'd win. I forced myself to meet her gaze. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, anxiety maybe, or surprise that I had actually shown up prepared. But it vanished instantly behind her practiced mask. The proceedings began slowly, formalities filling the first hour. But then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the presentation of evidence. My attorney stood, voice steady, and began laying out everything we had collected. The original will, traced and authenticated. Emails from Dad warning about potential manipulation. Records of account transfers and suspicious activity. Notes of my mother's unexplained actions since Dad's passing. Each piece was like a brick in a wall, slowly constructing a barrier against her claims. I watched my mother closely. With every document read aloud, every timeline presented, her composure cracked just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Then came the critical moment. The lawyer presented Dad's final letter, the one he had emailed to my uncle. My mother shifted in her seat, and for the first time she looked truly uneasy. "This letter," my attorney said, "clearly outlines the intentions of Mr. Wilson regarding his estate. It warns of potential attempts to alter or manipulate his wishes. It is direct, precise, and unambiguous." The courtroom fell silent. My mother's lawyer tried to object, but the judge dismissed it politely, signaling for the letter to be entered into evidence. I felt a surge of relief, but I knew the fight wasn't over. My mother's attorney rose, speaking with practiced passion. He argued that she had acted in good faith, that Dad's instructions were vague, that she had assumed responsibility for family assets. But we had the proof, the patterns of transfers, the hidden documents, the secret calls. Every argument he made crumbled against the evidence. Then, the judge asked for a statement from the involved parties. My mother stood first, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "I loved your father," she began, eyes glistening, "and I only wanted to protect what we built together. I did what I thought was best for the family." The words sounded hollow. I felt anger rise, but I kept it buried. This was my moment to speak the truth, not to shout in emotion. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, feeling the weight of the room settle around me. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly. Your Honor, I began, my father trusted all of us to respect his decisions. I loved him dearly, and I know he wanted fairness, not secrecy. He left clear instructions which were deliberately removed and altered by my mother. I am here to ensure his wishes are honored, not for revenge, but for justice. I watched the room as I spoke. Some whispered, some nodded. The judge scribbled notes, her expression unreadable but attentive. My mother's face tight, her lips pressed into a thin line. After my statement, the lawyers presented closing arguments. My attorney summarized every inconsistency, every act of concealment, every proof of intent. And finally, the judge asked both sides to step back as she reviewed the evidence and considered her ruling. I sat in my chair, heart hammering. Time seemed to stretch, each minute a small eternity. My mother stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly, her usual calm replaced with tension I had never seen before. Then the courtroom doors opened and the judge's gavel came down. Silence fell. After reviewing all documents, statements, and evidence, the judge began, it is clear that the intentions of the decedent were deliberately circumvented. Therefore, the original will, as drafted and authenticated prior to any alterations, shall be upheld. The words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Relief, joy, and disbelief swirled together. I glanced at my mother. Her face had gone pale. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Justice had been served, not through anger, not through vengeance, but through truth. The judge continued. All actions taken to alter or hide the original will are considered invalid. The estate will be distributed according to the decedent's original instructions. The room erupted quietly in murmurs. My attorney gave me a small, reassuring nod. I exhaled, tears welling up. This was more than winning a legal battle. This was restoring what Dad had intended. As we left the courtroom, my mother remained silent, her shoulders slumped. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in seeing her falter. Instead, I felt a quiet strength. I had faced betrayal, I had uncovered the truth, and I had honored my father. For the first time since his death, I felt peace. But the experience had changed me. It taught me the fragility of trust, the weight of family dynamics, and the power of standing firm when truth is on your side. Betrayal can come from the closest people in your life. It can shake you to your core, but it cannot define you. Strength, patience, and unwavering belief in justice, those are what see you through. And as I walked out of the courthouse, I knew something important. Dad's voice had been heard. His wishes had been honored. And I had survived the storm of betrayal stronger than ever. The weeks after the court ruling were quiet but heavy. My life slowly returned to a new rhythm, though nothing felt quite the same. The house still smelled of Dad's cologne, still held the echoes of family laughter. But now every corner reminded me of the trust I had lost and the strength I had discovered. I didn't speak to my mother much after the verdict. Her silence was loud enough. There was no need for confrontation. Justice had been done, and that was enough. I realized that sometimes closure doesn't come from apology or reconciliation. It comes from truth being acknowledged and honored. Sitting alone in Dad's study one evening, I looked at his books, his notes, the little mementos he had left behind. And I understood something profound. Life is unpredictable. People you love can surprise you, and not always in ways you expect. But how you respond, that is where your power lies. I learned that betrayal isn't just about the person who deceives you. It's also about how you allow it to affect you. I could have let anger consume me, let resentment take root, let bitterness define my days. But I chose a different path. I chose action, patience, and persistence. I also learned the importance of listening to your instincts. From the first whispered phone call to the missing documents to the small inconsistencies in my mother's story, my intuition had been right. Sometimes grief clouds your judgment. Sometimes love makes you blind. But when your gut tells you something is wrong, you have to pay attention. And most importantly, I realized that protecting what is right often requires courage. Not just the courage to fight in court, but the courage to face uncomfortable truths, the courage to see someone you love in a new light, and the courage to stand up when it's easier to stay silent. I thought about Dad, and I thought about everything he had taught me. Fairness, integrity, the idea that your word and your will matters. I felt proud that I had honored him, not through confrontation or vengeance, but by preserving his intentions. That was the victory I wanted most. Life doesn't give second chances for trust. Sometimes people who should have been protectors become the source of your greatest trials. And yet there is hope. There is always a way to reclaim control without losing your humanity. Now, when I think back to that time, the grief, the shock, the betrayal, I no longer feel helpless. I feel aware, vigilant, and strong. I feel a deep respect for my own resilience, for the clarity I gained in the midst of chaos, and for the lesson that truth, no matter how hidden, has a way of prevailing. I often tell myself this: betrayal can destroy, but it can also teach. It can reveal the hidden strength within you. It can sharpen your perspective, forcing you to value integrity and honesty more than comfort or familiarity. And it can remind you that justice is not always easy, but it is possible when you remain steadfast. So if there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from my story, it's this: don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts and never let betrayal define your worth. Stand firm, gather your evidence, and confront challenges with courage and patience. Because in the end, it's not just about the victory, it's about what you learn, how you grow, and the person you become through the storm. And that's how I survived the betrayal I never expected, protected the legacy of the man I loved, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The courtroom had given me justice. Life had given me a lesson, and for both I was deeply grateful.